If you design an education system based on performance, if tutors are obsessed about performance because the parents are anxious about performance, because the school is anxious about the performance, because the child then becomes anxious about the performance, you've created a learning environment that's actually completely counter to teaching someone. It's basic communication. We do that even in person anyway, but online you have to kind of amplify that aspect. You have to really think about it carefully. Mathematics is a great metaphor for life. You've got to think of, what the hell is this question asking? What is this problem even about? And that's like life. You encounter a problem. What is this? How can I start to attack this problem? In those moments, I realized I'm just getting so much more out of you online. You're like almost, some of them are different people online, and it makes no sense for me to teach in person.
Welcome to the Qualified Tutor Podcast. I'm your host, Ludo Miller, and I'll be interviewing tutors and thought leaders from across the tutoring landscape to inspire, inform, and motivate you to become the best tutor you can be. The Qualified Tutor community is a safe and supportive space for tutors who love to learn and grow. We offer training, resources, ideas, and a chance to connect with like-minded tutors. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes. Welcome to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast, and a huge welcome to a true pioneer of online tutoring, Atul Rana. Atul has built a large and dedicated following of tutors, educators, parents, and students by providing helpful, practical advice consistently to all tutors out there, but particularly in the field of maths and dyscalculia. When we first spoke, Atul stated clearly that he wishes to bring tutors, good tutors, into the mainstream of education. And as someone with over 8 years of online tutoring experience, who held his first ever tutoring session all the way back in October 2006, Atul has been in this field longer than most. Today, here, we're going to be discussing the approaches and strategies Atul has built over the years, including easy-to-follow steps for online tutors, both in terms of actual tutoring and continuing professional development. Atul, welcome to the QT podcast. How are you?
Thanks, Ludo. A pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to have you on with us. It's a pleasure to have you promoting what you do and what you've learned over the years on this podcast to our listeners and much further afield. So I feel there are a number of reasons for this, Atul, given you've been tutoring for so many years now. But we'd love to start with, what is your why as a tutor, Atul?
Oh, that's a great question to start off with. And before I sort of answer it as is, I think it's probably easier for me to use a story as like a format for the whole interview. So yeah, I'll go back to around 2014 when a parent contacted me in somewhere in South London to go to their home and to teach their daughter, who was in year 6 at the time, who wanted to, the parents were very keen on her going into certain schools because of the 11 plus exam, which incidentally I don't tutor for anymore, but at the time I did. So I went into the home, and the first thing the daughter brought out was a computer, and they said, I'll do my maths using the computer, like by typing it out. She had ADHD diagnosed, and she had some other bunch of issues, but she couldn't write very well or fast, so she was using a computer to type. And the very first thing I did was, we can't do maths on a computer on typeset, so we can't use a computer to do maths. Which is funny because maybe I think 3 years later I was teaching her online, and so she was using a computer to do maths. But at the time, that's what I said. And So yeah, this tutee, the parents were anxious because they knew that she was a long way behind. I'll put that on in inverted commas for her maths, and it's going to be a pretty close one for her to get into the whatever school they want her to get into. So I tutored her pretty every week, sometimes twice a week, and I think about 2 months down the line from the tutoring, the parents that just asked, "Is X and Y going to get into the school we want to?" And it's quite a tough question at the time for me, and I had to be completely honest. And I said, "Actually, I don't think she's got the foundational aspects sorted. So, I don't think she is, if I'm really honest. But." She might have a shot, depends on the exact school. But probably the more important thing is that she's actually started to learn maths. She started to make sense of things that didn't make sense to her. And she feels quite relieved about that, actually. So irrespective of what happens, I would urge you to continue the tutoring after we finished. So she didn't get into the schools. She stayed in the same school. But they did continue. And so she was in year 6. So then she got better and better, actually. So she was in the bottom set. She moved to the top of the bottom set. I remember I had a conversation with the teacher as well at the time. Then she moved into the second last set. And then, to cut a long story short, she just moved through sets and years. She went from year 6 to year 7 to year 8, year 9, 10, 11. By year 11, just the consistency. She ended up getting an A star in the IGCSE, decided to do A-level maths. We continued with A-level maths and ended up going to Cambridge last year in this pandemic year. So for me, that story encapsulates the why. What I want to do is not teach students to pass tests. Of course, it is very important for them at a certain point. It's a high stakes thing. But I'm here to change lives, because this child is now, well, it's practically adult. She's in Cambridge, I think, in the second year now. So it's a life-changing experience, really. And I think human beings are capable of an incredible amount of learning, provided they put in the effort and provided the teaching is long-term, it's well thought out, it's in sync with what the school is doing. I phoned up the teacher, we had a conversation, and we made sure that we're doing things that don't conflict. So it's really all people are capable of learning maths very, very well. And so for me, my why is getting them to learn that maths and treating it as a long-term thing, so rather than this kind of tutoring to the test. Yeah.
That is one of the most complete answers, Atul, that we've ever had to that question. And I was expecting some kind of sort of seismic ending, but that is certainly something pretty incredible that she's now studying at Cambridge, given her academic struggles when you first started with her. So there's quite a lot in there, really, isn't there, for the long-term application of learning that can be boosted or can be encouraged by one-to-one tuition. So it's difficult to know where to go from that at all. There's so much kind of in that. I want to hear more about kind of these stories. But I guess one thing to take from that is that the online tuition can be just as effective, if not more effective in many ways, to face-to-face tuition. So could you just run us through maybe some of the key strengths to online tutoring that you've experienced in your career as a tutor?
Yeah, there seems to be this sort of false dichotomy of online tutoring and face-to-face tutoring. And to be honest, it's all tutoring, really. This particular student, I used to, back in 2014, I'd have to travel a whole hour and like 15 minutes, I calculated, to teach for an hour, and then an hour, 15 minutes back. So it was just very inconvenient for me at the time. But by then I'd already been teaching 2-3 years online. So I knew, like, tutoring online or tutoring in general is about great communication. is about how you communicate your ideas, and this is batting to and fro from you and your tutee. So I've taught this thing to you, and I want you to be able to talk back, articulate back at me what I think I've taught to you. And if they aren't able to articulate it back, then there's clearly something wrong in my teaching. So, and that like core process, which is called the teach do in the mastery teaching program, which is Mark McCourt's written about the teach do. There's practice and then there's behave. So in this initial phase of teach do, that's all you're really looking for. Like, can you articulate back at what I've just taught to you, especially in maths? I've just done this. Here's a question. Can you do the example back on a similar question? Yes means you can do it. No means where exactly? No, you're stuck in this bit, that bit further down, etc., etc. So you do this you run this test. As tutors, we're running these tests. We're doing, in mainstream teaching, Mark says they're running thousands of tests per class. For tutors, it's probably around hundreds of tests per session. So really, with online tutoring, it's tutoring actually. A good tutor can be a good online tutor, whereas a tutor who is not a good tutor, to put it quite crudely, won't be a good online. If anything, the online will actually highlight even more, because you're working with limited things in perception. And one of the first things people felt was limited about online teaching, and the inquiries I would get from parents is, well, you're not there in person, so how can you judge where my pupil is? How can you see what they're writing? How can you... the biggest problem was, how can you see their writing, and how can you convey your writing to them? And I actually used both of those ideas, and I made it a strength of online teaching, which is actually, I think it's better that the student is not there in the person, because when you're in person, you're sitting with someone, especially this tutee who was teaching, who was year 6. I'm just physically bigger, and because she had ADHD, one of her ways out was she was just very, very intelligent, but very good at talking. So she could distract me with intelligent questions that were unrelated to what I was teaching. She really liked doodling as well. So I'd just see her doodling at a paper, and I'd stop her, and I said, like, why aren't you doing what I asked you to do? Why are you doodling away? I said, and I now know that actually, yes, that is one of her responses to relax, and that's our way to get into it. So I use this perceived weakness of online tutoring as this distance. I call it remoteness is in itself a pedagogical strength. The fact that there's not this social pressure where I'm watching every single thing that the student is writing there, and I'm a few times bigger than a child. You have all of this kind of things that it makes the situation a lot more high pressure, social pressure. I just found the tutors who are articulating, I got much more out of them online. And this is the same students I was teaching, sometimes in person and then online. And in those moments, I realized I'm just getting so much more out of you online. You're like, almost some of them are different people online. And it makes no sense for me to teach in person, because it's actually more effective. I can do more in that 1 hour purely from this fact that you're articulating more. And the fact that I couldn't see what they're writing and they can't see what I'm writing, or we could do it on bits of paper. So I'd actually ask them, can you write 2x plus 1 equals 6? Can you write it? And then they would write it. Can you show me what you've written if I wanted to see it? If I don't want to see it, I want to ask, how are you going to solve it? Well, I'll do this, this, and this. Or can you solve it and then show it to me? But I want them to articulate. So I made this and in person, this is kind of weird to say, can you articulate it? I mean, because you're sitting there right next with a piece of paper. So I learned how to articulate myself more, and I learned how to get them to articulate. And that's pedagogical strength.
Yeah. So is this a style that you developed over kind of your many years of tutoring, or something that you realized from quite early on that you were able to implement from your first days? For a tutor listening to this who's coming into their own of tutoring, what kind of support can you give for how you develop this kind of unique style? Yeah,
I would say it's basic communication. we do that even in person anyway. But online, you have to kind of amplify that aspect. You have to really think about it carefully. And instead of being fazed by, oh my God, I can't see what they're writing, say, actually, why don't we just make that a strength? You're using, and it's called dual coding. So you're using 2 channels always. You're using the audio channel and the visual channel. Well, can you make more use of the audio channel rather than over rely on the visual channel? There's a sensory one as well with manipulatives, but that's for other stuff. So I would say just do what you normally do in teaching, but don't be fazed by the fact that, these days you can use online whiteboards and things and you can replicate that process. So I've kind of evolved into that stage. But at the core of it, I've learned how to articulate and ask them to articulate. So that's really still the main thing, despite all the new technology.
Yeah, and that's important to remember, isn't it? Is that heightened sense of audio, of being able to communicate with your student through the online medium is not, as you say, a weakness. And actually, if you are a tutor who has been conducting online sessions over the past year and is considering moving back into into face-to-face tuition, then certainly something to consider is the processes and the patterns that you've built up over the past year, and not kind of disrupting that momentum that you've had with the student, especially if your student has got accustomed to working online. Going back to face-to-face tuition may in fact be more disruptive than remaining online and using those skills and abilities that they've picked up, both for you and the student. We've all learned digital skills this year, more than perhaps we were expecting, so let's make use of those, certainly.
This summer, join us for the first ever Love Tutoring Festival, a celebration of tutoring in all its aspects. We invite you to bring all your experience and expertise to make this event the most exciting event to ever happen in the world of tutoring.
The festival, running from Monday the 28th of June to Friday the 2nd of July, is a rich and varied programme of free events, keynote presentations, workshops, live podcasts, and practical demonstrations spread out over a whole week. And don't worry, everything will be recorded. So as long as you're enrolled, we'll give you access to any of the events that you miss later on. We're also offering a limited number of tickets for our famous CPD accredited workshops. If you purchase a ticket to any or all of these practical and engaging workshops, you'll also receive a certificate of completion after the event.
To register for the free pass and to grab your CPD tickets, go to qualifiedtutor.org/Love Tutoring Festival.
Now, Atul, I want to turn a little bit now towards something that is really a foundational concept in your tutoring service, in your tutoring philosophy. And this is something that's been kind of percolating in my mind, but also within the community, qualified tutor community that we have. Why is performance? Why is exam grades and performance? Why are they not a good measure of actual learning?
Well, this is a great question, and I could talk for hours just on this one. But I'll give you kind of the sort of a headline thoughts on it. I think this is a really huge problem with education and what's really shadow education. So the tutoring merely amplifies the problems with education. So the education in most Northwestern cultures is going on what's we call a conveyor belt system. So the teacher has a scheme of work in year 6. Let's go for the 11 plus. So today we are going to look at adding fractions with the same denominator for an hour session. And it's assumed that every child will grip, in theory, 100% of what the teacher wants them to grip. And if every child did grip exactly what the teacher and the system wants them to grip, by the end of year 6, 100% in the way everything is designed, the scheme of work is designed, they could pass a GCSE 4 or be pretty close to it, because a GCSE maths exam, to pass it, a 3 or 4, isn't actually that difficult. And Mark McCord's calculated this, about 1,600 hours worth of lessons during all of a pupil's school journey for just 320 odd mathematical ideas. The thing with the tutoring industry is it caters, because it's a livelihood, which is understandable. It caters to what I would call the pressure points, or where performance is rewarded in every way of speaking. So that's a 7 plus. The 11 plus, which is a high stakes, high reward thing. And then you got 13 plus in some public schools. You've got the GCSE, which is arguably probably the most high volume, highest stake one. And then you've got the A levels. So the tutoring industry is kind of, if you think of these as pressure points, that's where people make their livelihood. There's a few people who homeschool. I've got homeschooling tutees, adults, etc. And performance is, so the other why I tutor with this child, it wasn't that I was interested in her performing. I was really interested in her becoming a resilient individual, a mathematical child. To become a mathematician means to be able to, mathematics is a great metaphor for life. You've got a problem there that you don't know. You just look at it, and sometimes you might just get anxious and go blank. So you've got to think of, what the hell is this question asking? What is this problem even about? And that's like life. You encounter a problem. What is this? How can I start to attack this problem in all the tools I have so far in my toolbox? Which tool will I apply? How will I apply it? I might apply this tool, it doesn't work. I might apply that tool, it doesn't work. And that skill, where you apply these different things and it doesn't work, is not rewarded by the system. And that's like absolutely atrocious. The only thing that's rewarded by the system is actually getting the right answer, and that is performance. And if you design an education system based on performance, if tutors are obsessed about performance because the parents are anxious about performance, because the school is anxious about the performance, because the child then becomes anxious about the performance, you've created a learning environment that's actually completely counter to teaching someone. There's no such thing as, there's no such thing really as a curriculum to be spliced into year groups, because you can have children in year 6 that haven't learned any new mathematics, because mathematics is a hierarchical subject. From year 2 onwards, they've learned no new mathematics at all whatsoever. I get students who have learned no new mathematics since they don't number bond, they don't have number sense at all whatsoever. And then you have some in year 6 who are really batting to sort of year 8, year 9 level. So of course they are going to pass the 11 plus. Because the whole thing is designed around performance, and real learning is very difficult to infer because there's no direct measure of it. Real learning can be inferred by an expert because you can get the feel of how they're thinking mathematically. So when I get a dyscalculia tutee and they're making loads of beautiful patterns with their rods or their dots, I tell them, wow, you are really mathematical. It just hasn't come through in a formal sense. You're not doing mathematics formally, but you have such a mathematical mind. Or I have another dyscalculia tutee. He's really great with assembling computers, making computers. And he's interacting live. I mean, he's just gripping stuff very, very fast. But I've used the right modality, right thing. So for me, that's how I measure. But because he's been judged his entire life, he's in year 10 now, he's been judged for his performance. He's got extremely low self-esteem. Parents think he's not that good at maths. I've just told him, you're very good at maths because you can work. You are mathematical.
Yeah. I think there is a little bit in there. You're alluding to some of the processes, Atul, that you've picked up over your time as a tutor, that so many tutors completely, not their fault at all, but they haven't had the time with the students to understand that. So if you could pick apart a little bit more what you're talking about there in a kind of wider sense, what does what you've just said tell us about the difference between expert tutors and tutors who are just beginning, and novice tutors?
Well, like if you look at any other parts of industry. It makes perfect sense when you look at other professions in the industry, and we have to teach. We have to take tutoring seriously. It's a profession. When I think about tutoring, I don't think of it as a pocket money job, which it can be for quite a lot of people. I think of it as a serious profession. I think of it in the Aristotle term, where he was a tutor and he did the teaching for Alexander the Great. So in Japan, I believe a teacher is still called something like a novice teacher, or they're not called a teacher for the first 10 years of their teaching. So it takes around roughly 10 years to become expert at anything. So when I was doing my mechanical engineering degree, you do your years in industry, you do your training, you are mentored, and after a certain number of industry experience, you're given chartered status. And at that point, I can say I'm actually an engineer, a chartered engineer. The problem with the tutoring industry is anyone can set up as a tutor, and they're called a tutor. And it simply does take a lot of time and a lot of teaching experience to learn and then become an expert tutor. And I would even go as far as arguing that possibly most of the tutoring industry is novice, because it is a pocket money job for a lot of people. It's just something they do as a stopgap. There are expert teachers who tutor on the side, and that's fine because that's their day job as well. But it really does take that much time. I just don't know why in tutoring we don't think that it takes 10 years to become an expert tutor. Like a surgeon would have been doing surgery for many years before you can trust them to do like expert surgery. So that's the difference. And the experts are able to see things. It's almost like you develop a sixth sense. You're able to intervene much faster. Your parent gives an inquiry. I can read from the inquiry, from the email, actually what the parent's going to be like, what they're after. For me, like, they're so anxious about performance that they can't think in the long run. I don't think that's going to be a good client. I can just pick that up, or I can pick that up. Like, I can pick up the whole everything, like the dynamics of what's going on. I can read things faster. I can figure out what the true starting point of the pupil is and how to intervene in the appropriate way, and communicate. And it's a system as well. It's a system between the tutor, the tutee, the parent, and the school. All four are important. So experts are able to just, play these four parts of it very, very, in a very intelligent and well thought out way.
Good, which is the greatest self-promotion that you've given yourself so far, Atul. Very, very modest and humble individual, but that's certainly true. There is another level, isn't there, to being an expert tutor, which involves these kind of completely natural understandings and approaches to the entire sphere of education of a student, whether that's the parents, whether that's what they do at school, whether that's who they are as an individual, their nurturing, their upbringing, all these kind of things. An expert tutor will be able to pick up on, not just outside the session, but within the session as well, little subtleties and changes in mood and kind of humor and that kind of those areas that are so key to one-to-one tuition. So I think those are it may be a bold statement for many tutors to hear that most of the tutoring industry is made up of novice tutors, but it's not wide of the mark really, and that's something that many organizations and agencies, including ourselves, are trying to change, is to bring about that kind of professionalism and regulation to this young but ambitious industry. Now we're just coming towards the kind of the 25 minute, half an hour mark that tends to kind of be the parameters of these wonderful episodes. We know our listeners would love to sit in longer, but we also appreciate the kind of a listener attention span. So there are a couple of questions I'd like to finish with, Atul, and maybe if you were able to give these as kind of just wonderful kind of short, sharp pieces to leave our listeners with. What are your top 3 tips for maths tutors working online?
Yeah, so I would say the number one tip is get continuous professional development, and that means attending maths conferences and also conferring with your other maths tutor colleagues, because you learn more from your CPD and maths tutoring colleagues than you will by tutoring. Like, I learned more in the last 4 years of my maths CPD and tutoring and conferring than I did in the 10 years before, actually. So that's my number one. Number two, with online tutoring, just focusing on the online tutoring aspect, keep it extremely simple in the beginning. Don't get distracted by the technology. Extremely simple means if you can conduct a tutoring session just with a video call, just do that and add the moving parts in very, very slowly. And the third tip I would say is you've got to expand, because the tutoring industry is driven by this performance thing. And if you are a GCSE tutor, it's tempting to just tutor GCSE. If you're an A-level tutor, it's tempting just to tutor A-level or A-level further maths or 11 plus. But maths is a hierarchical subject, and it is, that it's unnegotiably hierarchical. So if you're teaching A-level and your student doesn't know about inequalities, for example, you've got to expand your teaching in both directions in the earlier phases. So teach someone, if you're an A-level tutor, teach a level GCSE. So see where the foundational knowledge comes from. And if you teach A-level maths, then teach further A-level maths. Or if you teach 11 plus, teach the older ones. Because it's a whole, mathematics is not one, you can't pick one bit of it. You have to understand the whole big picture.
Okay, well, there's the challenge for maths tutors, is to drop down your level of maths to the level below, and then the objective is to push past that, push through that, and take your student to the level above, essentially, if you're able to. Thank you, Atul. That's very kind. And finally, where can listeners find you and find you next? What's coming up next, and where can people get in contact if they want to talk more about what you do?
Well, I'm fairly prominent on social media, so I'm easy to find. You can just, probably Twitter is the best one. So you can, my Twitter handle is just my first name and surname, which is ATULRANA. And I suppose my next big thing is presenting at MathsConf 26. It's July the 10th or 12th, I can't remember, but I'll post that, and I'll be presenting about the field axioms, which are 9 axioms in maths. And relating to that very last tip, it's the 9 axioms of maths that underpin the whole subject. So that's my next thing. So
brilliant. Wonderful. Well, as I said, Atul is far too modest to promote the other areas in which he is present. He has a Facebook live stream every Sunday. He is social media rep for BitPaper, the wonderful video tutoring app. He hosts Maths Chat Live. You can find him on Maths Tutors UK or Science Tutors UK, the two very big online tutoring communities. So there are many places to find Atul and the people that Atul leads, directs, supports, encourages. And there's and now you can find him on the QT podcast. So thank you very much, Atul. That was an extremely thorough look through kind of the philosophies behind the tutoring that you do, and really an encouragement to online tutors that what they're doing is incredibly valuable and doesn't have to be replaced with face-to-face tuition as soon as we can. That there's much advantage to the online tutoring sphere. And he's finished with some his top 3 tips for maths tutors. So go and implement them this afternoon or tomorrow or whenever you listen, and we will see you all next time. Thank you very much, Atul.
Thanks, Vida. My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast, where tutors share their expertise to support the tutoring community. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes below. We exist to connect, share, and learn with you because tutoring is a small job that makes a big difference. You know why Zoom does that now? It has that very strange kind of voice. Did you hear that just then?
Yeah, I did. It is, yeah.
Being recorded. Anyway.
That's consent and everything, yeah. That's away from the wild days of Zoom before.
Yeah, I know. Finally, they're bringing things back in, yeah. Welcome to this episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast, and a huge welcome to a true pioneer of online tutoring, Atul Rana. Atul has built a large and dedicated following of tutors, educators, parents, and students by providing helpful, practical advice consistently to all tutors out there.